The Process, a podcast about creativity and experimental music. In the world of experimental music, outcomes and accolades for creators can be uncertain and at times seem far and few between. Therefore, creators and practitioners of experimental music must embrace the one thing they will always have complete control over: the process. This podcast aims to understand this creative process by listening to new works and discussing them with their creators. Each episode focuses on one creator and their music. Understanding how and why they create can inform aspiring creatives and help audiences better understand and navigate experimental music. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and I'll be your host as we explore the world of experimental music, creativity, and the human need to find purpose in their world and lives. This is The Process.
For myself, a lot of the inspiration is coming from actually listening to other people. I listened, so I have, I'm part of a collective that's called the Golden Shrimp Guild, and it's like an online synth collective. So there's like a lot of artists that are all across the world that primarily stream on Twitch, but do other things as well. Right. Yeah. And a lot of times my inspiration comes from listening to a lot of my fellow artists, because I'd probably say more than 5 years ago, to not have the amount of influences of different genres of music readily accessible to me is huge. So I wouldn't have touched noise. I wouldn't have touched certain forms of techno. So honestly, listening to a lot of different genres of music kind of really help inspire and motivate what type of direction I want to do with mine. So it's not always the same ambient flow.
Right. Yeah. And that's interesting too, because sometimes it's you're listening to something else and it's in a different style and you're like, oh, well, that's a really cool idea or the concept. What if it's something that's really loud and then really quiet? But you're like, well, I don't do trip house, industrial, whatever, noise folk or whatever, right? So right. do you find yourself saying hey, I can take that kind of concept and do my thing? Is that
exactly? It's like, okay, I may not be able to do 100% of this thing that I'm hearing, but there are elements of it that I think could fit in really well. It's okay, maybe I could use a little bit more distortion to make this a darker ambient, or maybe I could like add some additional layer of bass that I wouldn't normally do, but it sounds really good to counteract like the very happy ambient flows. So it's a lot of times it's like taking elements of what I hear and figuring out how I can apply them appropriately.
So you're inspired. You're inspired by, somebody else's great idea. Right? It's more complex than that. But so you're inspired. So what do you do then? Do you sit down in front of the modular? Is there a step in between sort of introducing the technology and being inspired, or do you just go right to the instrument?
These days it's going right to the instrument. Like when I started out a few years ago, like a lot of my work was with groove boxes and hardware synths. Yeah. And lately, almost, I would say 95% of what I do these days is purely modular now. So it's honestly like a lot of it is just like firing up the rig and like sitting in front of it and then kind of figuring out what's the vibe. A lot of times it's often kind of a paired of like, what's the BPM that I want to do? So how like fast or slow do I want this to go? And what's going to be like the initial voice that's going to like carry things off? I tend to like compositions more often than not that have multiple voices like layering on top of each other and kind of fading in and out over time. But I always want like, okay, what's the starting voice that's going to lead off everything, kind of influence how, like what goes along with it.
Right. So working with that like kernel of the idea and then just kind of going from there. Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of tech involved, and even just sitting down in front of a modular rig for someone like you, it's, like you're comfortable there.
I wouldn't always agree with that, but I know what you mean.
I was just talking to Steven, and he's like, I'm finally figuring out how to use this stuff. And he's been doing it for like 25 years. I was like, man, that's a steep learning curve. Like,
it kind of is.
Yeah. So do you ever find that becomes then sort of a screen between, the creative idea and the final output? Or is that part of the magic of it too, is that there is this sort of translation that happens?
A lot of times it varies. Like there will be times where I have a very kind of like set, like this is what I think I wanted this. Like, okay, I want this very twinkly, uplifting sound. And to do that, okay, maybe I need a physical like modeling module that will kind of emulate that. And then all of my friends joke I use a lot of reverb in my stuff. That's kind of like the special sauce of what I do. It's like if I'm not using at least 2 or 3 reverbs, am I doing it wrong?
Are you doing it? Are you even making music, right?
Exactly. So it's like sometimes it's like I have a good idea of where I want to do things, and some of it is just literally I'm just going to like throw something out there and just kind of like let it sit and see how it feels. Because the thing with modular is like a lot of times you don't know what's going to come out of it. Like some things, like you can set certain sequences to do what you want it to. You can set certain effects to do what you want it to. But some of it is like pure chaos and you have to lean into it. And that's one of the things I've been trying to be more comfortable is leaning into the chaos and working with it, which is scary at times. Right. But sometimes yields really good results that I'm like, I may never get this again. So thank goodness I better be recording this at some point.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So how are you documenting? Because sometimes with modular, like it happened once and that it never happens again. So you smiled and got nervous when I said that too, because I feel like the anxiety of like, it's just so ephemeral. It can be like, it can work one time and then never again.
I mean, no, you nailed it. Like there are definitely times where I've like come up with something and I'm like, oh, this sounds great. And I like didn't record it all. And like when it's time to record, it isn't quite right. And no matter how many times I try to like, let me do another take. Let me do another take. And then, or like you come up with like some type of song and there might be like one little patch. You're like, okay, I wish this could have sounded this way. But when you try to like go back at it, you might fix that piece, but something else completely goes right. Because I tend to, a lot of times these days, use a lot of generative sequencing. Sure. So there are certain ways you can control it, but it's still, it's random. And it's like, so there are times that I'm smart that if I remember to, I start recording right away. There are other times I don't, and it might take a couple takes.
Yeah.
And it just might be one of those things where I'm like, this worked out, or this was just in the moment. And it was a fleeting moment and time to move on.
Yeah, and it's kind of like red light syndrome too, where it's like when you're not recording, the best ideas happen, right? And then when you are, it's like they're gone. So how are you documenting? Are you just using like a hardware recorder, or are you using your computer to record and document this stuff?
I use my computer, so it's like either I'll use, like, if I'm being intentional with specifically recording for the sake of recording, because DAWs are scary to me. So I tend to use Audacity as a very basic, recording means. There are also times like most of the music I do, I tend to stream on Twitch. So a lot of times after a stream, I'll be like, oh, here was a really cool piece that I could probably take out of it. And then usually I'll use Audacity or something to like fade that piece in and out, tweak levels, so forth, and just be like, here's a snapshot. And that'll work, because if I were to try to do, like, I've gone afterwards where, like, after a stream, I'm like, oh, I really liked that. Let me do it again.
Let me rework
and then again, it won't say in the same way. So sometimes it's just easier to pull a portion of the recording from the stream and use that.
And that's exciting too, in a way too, because then the recording or the track that you're hearing on the album is not the product of like years of knob turning and tweaking, but rather in that moment there was this really great electrical thing that happened, and and there it is, and you happen to capture it. Yeah. Oh.
Absolutely.
So with all of this going on, and like maybe sometimes not being able to do too many, edits or changes, how do you know when something's done? And does actually the ephemeral nature of it, does that actually make it easier to just be like, well, it's done because I can't do it again? Or you're shaking your head no, though. So like, I assume.
It's like, it varies. It's like, sometimes like there'll be that rare case where it's like the one take is good enough. Like, okay,
sure,
I have to regularly remind myself, I'm like, I'm not going to make this perfect, and nor should there be an expectation for this to like sound like exactly the way I want it to. And so there's sometimes where after some means of like mixing and like fading things and whatnot, I just kind of, there are times like I'll record it and I'll capture it, and then I walk away from it, and then I'll come back to it later. And a lot of times when trying to figure out albums, something that I really liked in the moment, I'll listen back to it like 6 months later. I'm like, I'm not feeling that right now. It was good for when it was, but it's not where I am now. So I'm just going to leave it.
Has it ever been shorter than that? Like you just listen to it the next day and be like, oh my Lord, are my ears broken? Like what?
Oh yeah. I'll be like,
I do that all the time.
Or it's like one of those things of like, okay, it was really cool in that moment for what it was.
Right.
But like from like a different scale perspective of like, okay, this was really cool for an improv thing, but like as a recording piece or like a single or something like that, it doesn't feel right, or it doesn't fit the vibe of whatever I might be trying to do. So it's sometimes it's just an assessment of, it's okay if some things work in the moment. They may not be something that's long lasting, but I think it still helps with the experience of kind of feeling that out when you can.
Do you think the streaming, like taping, having the streaming, having the documentation, do you think that helps too, and just kind of like self-evaluation and having compassion for yourself, right? To just be like, all right, hey, like it's a learning process. But do you think that helps, like having that documentation to be like, oh, okay, like this was effective or this wasn't effective? Yeah.
It's super helpful. Like I will sing the graces of like doing like live streaming as a means, because one, it tends to be like, it's the best way for me to practice my stuff.
Sure.
Because it's like, I can't always like carve out time of, okay, this point in time, I'm going to work on a song or something. Sometimes I just need to be thrown into like hit and be like, okay, just do it. What helps a lot of times with live streaming is that if you have a decent sized audience listening at that time, you get immediate feedback. So it's really nice to play, okay, maybe I played 3 songs in an hour stream, and like I'll get like 20 people saying, oh my gosh, I really liked this one. It's like, I love this thing. Then you like, it's very easy to take that aside and be like, okay, let's revisit that and see, can I do
Yeah.
something more with it? Can
Right.
I record it? So I think with streaming, it's really nice that you get immediate feedback from the audience. You get to be
Yeah.
able to, after you're done with the thing, watch the video,
Right.
see, like, kind of hear how it sounded. Is it what it's like? So that kind of visual and audio documentation, I feel, comes in really handy.
And it's timestamped too, because you're saying when somebody's like
Yes.
awesome or like heart shape or whatever, there's like a timestamp.
Exactly.
So you know exactly at this moment, like, hey, everyone really liked this change or transition, or yeah. So then you can play all the hits, right?
Yep. There again, it comes in really handy to be like, okay, here's that timestamp. Let me take that out. Let me like post that up on YouTube or something as like, here's an exploration. And then again, do an assessment later of like, is this good enough to like put out later on actual album? So it's like nice to be able to capture that in stages in terms of how effective can this be and how well could it stand on its own as a recording. This is like the first album that has been primarily using modular synthesis. All of the previous tracks and albums beforehand were all hardware synths, keyboards, groove boxes, etc. So I wanted to kind of accomplish two things to show what progress I was making in terms of modular. Because a lot of times with my albums, I like it to be a snapshot of like where I am in my music journey. It's like I'll look back at the first album and be like, I'm not sure I would do that now. It was good, like it was like it showed what it was doing, but
it's cool because you're kind of like, oh, remember those times, like remember the old times, or like So
it's like it's really good perspective to kind of see, okay, from last year to this year, what changes have occurred. And so with this one, I wanted to focus on modular, and two, I wanted to kind of like the previous album had like a lot of range between like darker ambient stuff, and this time kind of with the state of the world, I wanted something that was a little bit more uplifting, a little bit like
yes, we need it.
Like there's like towards the end of the album there's like a couple of moodier stuff, but I wanted to be like, okay, we have a lot of things on our plate. Let's at least have something that kind of feels, a little bit more positive, a little bit more like
Right.
uplifting to kind of, carry through your day and the way that
Right.
it works. So I basically wanted to focus on making it a means to like learn different aspects of my modular rig. I wanted to lean into, like I said before, I tend to use a lot of reverb. I don't use much delay. And like one of the things I want to do is find ways that delay, whether standard or granular or whatever, can work, and kind of like, instead of doing layers of voices, focus on one or two voices in a song and let like the effects make it more so. So kind of make it both minimalist, but also not. And those were kind of like my goals of this album. Kind of make it a little bit more upbeat, show a little bit more range in utilizing things like delay, and just like let it be a means for me to practice modular synthesis more.
And, even with Grains of Glee, which is the opening track from the album, it is simple. It is simple in its sort of, here's an idea, it's presented, and then you do a wonderful job over the course of about 4 minutes, sort of expanding that idea, whether it's like through delay lines or just like kind of short shifting of the rhythms to kind of create kind of new complex harmonies. But just the amount of restraint was really cool, because like immediately you're like, okay, kitchen sink, like let's do it, let's throw it all in. And I was just like impressed by that, and I was like, oh, that's refreshing. And I mean, I know it's the first track of the album, right? So usually you kind of slowly step into a sound world. But talk a little bit about that, about how the form of that piece, like how you kind of constructed that, and it felt really whole, it felt really finished, but it also felt really simplistic.
Yeah, no, you pretty much nailed that description. I worked on it immediately after coming back from KnobCon. So from those who are like not familiar, like it's usually the annual synthesizer convention that happens out of Chicago every year, typically in September. So after coming back from that last year, as usual, from like checking out all the gear, from listening to all the performances, you get a whole bunch of inspiration and be like, oh, I'd like to try that, so on and so forth.
You're also like, I need to get a second or third job, right, to buy all this stuff.
Yeah, it's like, oh, maybe I need to expand my case to fit all these things that I'm now like are on my radar. Thanks. Yeah, it's like, maybe I can get my cats to get jobs. That jobs,
yeah. See, that's a whole revenue stream you're just leaving right there. Yeah,
I know, things I got to work on. But yeah, I came back from that, and I'm like, again, kind of got a lot of inspiration of like, I tend to with a lot of songs do a lot of different voices, and like I wanted to be like, okay, let's focus one voice, let's like utilize that one voice alone, and just like see how lean into the effects, lean into delay, because again, delay is a thing I'm better at it now, but like months ago, like I almost never use, like don't have as much comfort with like finding way that delay is not too overwhelming, or just why even bother. So for this one, I used one voice. The running joke I say is that I tend to have a lot of noise engineering modules in my rig, and I always find a way to make those are things that normally sound industrial and like very techno, and I find a way to make them very ambient sounding. So that voice is like a Timp Legio, which is normally a percussive module, and I basically ran it through a little bit of distortion, some shimmer reverb, and just a standard 3-tap delay. But just again, kind of leaning into, we're only sticking with this one voice, and we're going to use the effects to make it bigger than what it is, but still make it seem simple in nature. So that's kind of how I worked on that one. I just like wanted to keep it short, because I didn't want like the novelty of it to wear off quickly. Right.
I think it's really interesting that you're kind of saying with this entire album that you sort of had these rules, and I find that too. No, I find that I'm like, okay, on this one, I definitely want to do this, or looking back at the last album, I'm like, hey, I didn't really have any percussion in this album. Like, I need to do more of that. Did you ever find yourself when doing this album say, oh, F the rules? Like, I'm just going to put a lot of reverb on this track. Like, that's like your equivalent of me being like, oh, I'm going to do this or that. Like, did you just say the hell with it? Like, I'm doing it. Or were you really, did you stick to the rules? Did you stay?
Well, I think it's interesting because a lot of times not like for an entire album, but a lot of like the albums I've done in the last 3 or 4 years have been based off of like things I've worked on in January, which is like that experience of like every day during the month of January, like record something for a minute. And so a lot of times in that month when I do stuff, like I'll do one type of restriction or rule. And this time around, it was like, only use your modular. And make sure it's a different combination of modules being used. So that way it's like changing things up. So like when I set rules, they're kind of like in that sense.
Yeah. It's not like,
to like limit right. Well, it's more like, it is a limitation, but like, it's like a limitation in one way, but still giving many of options in other parameters. So based off of that, like when I do an album, it's not even so much like the album itself has a lot of restrictions or limitations. It might be the things that I chose to put on it may have had individual like rules set on like this track or this one, but they could be completely different ones, which then means it's like allows for a lot more variety, diversity, like within an album. So I tend to do that. If I ever think of something, it might be, I want this to be mostly ambient, or I want this to be darker in nature, or something. So
and so it's more of like it's a growth thing. It's less of like a restricting yourself, but like you're saying, like you're using it to say like, hey, what if I use this and this together? Like how am I going to navigate that? And
that is exactly it. I use it basically as a growth thing. So I'm not in the same rut. I'm doing this type of vibe all the time. Right. I love ambient, and that's the thing that most people know me for, but it's like I do more than ambient. So like I want to do these things to be able to grow in other genres and be able to showcase them appropriately. So those kind of like rules or restrictions are more like this is helping me to grow and like advance like my journey in music.
Well, Robyn, this has been awesome. Hearing about your music, hearing about from Daybreak to Nightfall. We're all excited about the new EP coming up as well. Before I let you go, let us know where we can go to not only watch your streams, your Twitch stream, where we can go to find out more about you and your music, and then maybe any performances or anything you have coming up.
Sure. So again, most of the time, like at least like probably 2 to 3 times a week, I'm streaming on Twitch. So under the artist name TotoRobyn, because I'm a big studio jiggly nerd. So you could basically find me on there. I'll also post a lot more like kind of like casual recordings of things on Instagram or YouTube. So you can usually find like music that's like in the moment, not necessarily a finalized track, but like here's like a concept that I'm working. Exactly. Yeah. In terms of next performance, I actually I just a couple of days ago found out that I'll be performing in like the Saturday afternoon ambient set for NobCon. So that's awesome. Thank you. So that's partly where I'm like excited and also like, oh gosh, what have I done?
Right. So, yes. Your mind's exploding. Like,
So at least now I'm like, okay, I have a month to prepare. That is plenty of time.
Oh, that's plenty of time to procrastinate. Yeah.
Although we say that and you don't, so every time there's a live gig, 90% of the time, 2 or 3 days before a live gig, I'm like, I'm not feeling this. I'm throwing this out the window. I'm going to do something else. And I'm like, why? Why do I do this to myself?
Even worse, like maybe I should just change my whole philosophy on making music and the production process. 3 days before. 3 days before.
Like, oh no, don't give yourself anxiety. It's totally fine. So that's honestly, that's like the next big thing coming up is preparing for that. So I got my work cut out for me the next couple of weeks.
Fantastic. Thanks to Robyn for sharing her time and music with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please check out other episodes in the series. And as always, like, subscribe, or leave a comment in your preferred podcasting app. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and this has been The Process.